Welcome on back, my ghouls and goblins. Welcome back to your home and mine, the graveyard. I will be your graveyard wizard, Ed. And I think it's time to draw a flower. I think this will be a good spot, right here, for a flower to rest eternally. I gots to throw down some of these little clippy clips. You know, at the end of a sketchbook, sometimes it gets a little bit rowdy. I definitely find the end of a sketchbook to be a place where most of my pages start to get a little less, what would I say? Accommodating. The book's starting to be full of things. You know, there's just not as much space. So sometimes the pages kind of press down weird. You'll see here I kind of press some of the pages down with I have a bone folder, and I kind of press it down so it's not kind of flopping and folding. But today I'm drawing some springtime blossoms. I don't think I'd necessarily call this a tutorial, but I would call this me practicing because I'm out here trying to learn and figure out how to draw blossoms. At least blossoms in a way that feels like they're kind of my own. I've seen so many great ways to draw blossoms in different ways, and I just kind of wanted to get something that felt like it was true to me, you know? Especially if you're drawing flowers a lot like I do. You know, eventually you kind of just want something that feels like home, like an old pair of pants. Here's another surprise. I've been using this 0.1 micron to sketch, to do my little line-in sketches. See, there's the bone folder. There she is. And I've been really enjoying just that kind of scratchy feel that a 0.1 micron has. I don't know. I've been really pleasantly surprised. I feel like I'm constantly looking for different art supplies and things to be my daily driver, or what's it called? My daily carry. And there's a few things that will rotate in and out. And there's been some road dogs, things that are with you always. And right now, the last couple of weeks, I don't want to jinx anything, but the 0.1 micron has been with me for quite a bit. And even, I don't know, microns never really clicked with me. Even throughout college, I was never that impressed with them. I've always not impressed isn't the right word. I've always been really drawn to fountain pens and things like that. And now that I'm using microns more, I'm seeing the light, if you will. I'm also using this ink brush pen. It's a synthetic brush pen. I saw someone use it on Instagram, on YouTube, and they made it look so good. I've flirted with these synthetic brush pens a lot in my art career, and I've always seen what people can do with them, and I've never felt like I can get that same outcome. And the more I talk to people, the more I realize that it's just you just have to practice. That's all it is. You just kind of keep practicing. Some of my greatest downfalls is that I care too much. I love too hard. I work too hard, and I care too much, and that I press too hard with my art supplies. And I think the brush pen has it's been a shortcoming for me with the brush pen, because I think I want to press hard. I want to get that big rowdy mark, but I've seen some stuff that people have made where they just get just the tip of the brush, and you can make some really beautiful stuff. I do something really crazy here in the next moment where I start kind of shading these veins out without drawing the outside of the leaf, and I never work that way, so I don't know what I was thinking. I'm just out here being a crazy man, This is another technique that I use. You can kind of see here where I'm putting more lines on the side that would be the quote unquote underside of the petal or the leaf. I do it also when I come in and shade this stuff. You can see that I start putting down, I just shade the underside. That's kind of how it's a bit stylized, but that's kind of how I think of these things, where I will, one side is the underside, and so it has more shade, or I try to make it darker, and then the other side is catching a little more light, and so I'll usually have that be a little bit lighter. I like how it looks. I mean, obviously everyone's going to draw things a little bit differently, but man, I do love drawing leaves, and I think especially with florals, the way you do a leaf can really be nice. I think it gives the leaves kind of give florals that they're the supporting character, like someone to help support the flower. Like the flower's there, it's the thing you're there for, it's big and beautiful, but man, those leaves really they can help frame your flower if you do them well. That's what I'm always trying for. I'm always trying to get those leaves to just be a beautiful accent to the flower, I also promise that I won't be so crazy the rest of the video. I don't know why I was doing the outline last. It's so wild. It's real, truly unhinged behavior. Another thing I'm kind of doing with this sheet is, so this was the kind of the thought behind all of this was I wanted to practice some blossoms and make them feel, the more you practice something, the more it kind of, more of you comes through it. And I know I've mentioned before here on this channel that sometimes I struggle with the center of flowers, and I think each one of these flowers I try a different technique to varying effects. You can let me know what you think, the different which center is your favorite, or maybe makes you feel the least yucky, because I think sometimes the center of these things can kind of have a yucky feeling to them if you do them very wrong. And maybe, you know what, like anything, I'm sure I'm probably overthinking it, but hey man, these are when you get to a certain point of drawing stuff a lot and you start really overthinking all the weird little things. Another thing I've really been enjoying is the petal veins, I guess you'd call them, those lines inside the petals. I used to really try to make them like hyper clean and like just the smoothest dang thing. And lately I've been really enjoying kind of making them a little more rowdy and not as perfect feeling, which to me seems absolutely like unhinged behavior. But I think it kind of adds to the naturalism of the petal. I mean, let me know if you disagree or not, but I don't know. There's just something I've really been drawn to. I think, I wouldn't call these hyper realistic, but I definitely would call them more of like a realistic illustrative style. And I think, I don't know, they just, I really like the way these the lines in the petals have been looking, and I've kind of just been doing them chunky and raw and rowdy, but dang, I'm into it, I guess this is also a good time to kind of talk about if this were going to be a pretend tutorial. That wasn't necessarily my intent, but you kind of see me do multiples. So I'm drawing the size of the flowers. The first one I do, where center is where the second kind of little circle goes. And then the petal that's going to be, I think of it as the bottom / like closest to us, is the one that I kind of draw an oval for. And that's the one that's going to kind of flip up. And then the other ones are kind of they're ovular circles that are kind of facing further out. I also will draw a line down the center of the petal if I feel like I'm having a hard time figuring out where the petal needs to be symmetrically. Sometimes if I don't draw that center line, I personally will kind of draw them wonky, especially since these petals have that kind of dip in the middle. If I don't have that center line, sometimes I will draw the dip at the wrong spot and it just feels totally off. I also am really enjoying these flowers that you can kind of see where the petals overlap and then there's like a gap at the center. I really like that. I don't know. Again, it kind of just helps give it this natural feel. I don't even know if that's a specific type of flower that does that. I kind of think of it as like blossoms in general do, especially like I think apple and maybe cherry blossoms. I'm not 100%. There's so many cherry blossom drawings out there that it's hard to say exactly if I've just seen it accentuated that way or not. But I like that kind of little bit of characteristic to my flowers personally. I think it kind of adds a little something. And that's the fun of it, you're always the more you draw something, the more you can kind of make it yours, especially if you're drawing like OC or whatever, I think the more you can kind of make it feel like yourself is coming through it, it's only going to make it more fun. So these are the little like stamen, the little seed guys. I should know my flower anatomy better since I draw them all the time, but this is one. I think this ends up kind of being my favorite, even though I don't feel like I necessarily crushed the execution. But hey, man, that's learning. That's drawing. That's learning. It all kind of comes together slowly, and eventually you got something at the end of it. I also end up adding some more shading to these flowers in general, as well as the centers, and I think that kind of helps the centers feel a little more grounded, for lack of a better term. So if you're really not liking the centers, you just hold on a minute and maybe you will. So I did 4 of these blossoms, and then I ended up doing a little bit of filler, that kind of like cherry blossom falling vibe. I really liked the way everything was looking, and I just felt like they could use something in between. And I've been trying to make my spreads look a little more, I guess, quote unquote, finished. I mean, it's a sketchbook. A sketchbook is always going to be for play. It's a place to kind of work and practice and try things out. But obviously, since I'm making videos, I want there to be a good payoff. I want there to be, oh, excuse my autofocus. She's getting rowdy up in there. Oh my gosh, the autofocus is out of control. Please forgive me. But I want there to be something at the end that people can look at and be like, hey, I like that. That looks nice. Where when I finish this sketchbook, I'll do a flip through video, and you can kind of see that there's some pages that are just like, it's like you're just showing your work, and that's fine. I want to have that picture perfect, like every page is a beautiful spread type of sketchbook, but I think that for me that is unrealistic, and I think it's also just like, that's like a whole thing, that like people that do that also have probably sketchbooks where they're getting rowdy. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe there are people that don't have rowdy sketchbooks or parts in their sketchbooks, but I'm just a sloppy boy, and I have to have an area where I can get messy at, And my sketchbook is that for me. It's where I go to play. You just try things out, Sometimes you got to try things out a lot. At least I do. I have to try things over and over again before I really start getting a feel for it. And that's why I was like, I'm going to do a little page, a little spread of flowers and just hammer it out, Sometimes you just got to sit down and spend some time with something. And that way it really kind of comes to you a little more. I think you can start figuring things out the more you spend time with them. Like I personally, I figure things out while I talk about them, so I kind of have to talk things through, which I didn't realize until much later in life. But I think drawing can be very similar in that sense, where I will learn things about the way I draw by doing. And even like if I have an idea, if I have to kind of rough it out and like sketch it and play with it and like kind of build it up piece by piece, rather than I can't just like sit down and make it happen. And some people can, and like I love that for them. I love that journey for them. I have a friend that I work with, and he like will have an idea and he sits down and draws it out. For the most part, he spends a lot of time with it, but he just like does it. And I have to draw it out. I have to think on it. I have to consider it. I have to like go through kind of different multiple iterations, especially for like a big finished piece. And some people just aren't that way, and everyone's going to work different. So, if you got a sketchbook that's haunting you, like just know that it's okay. That, I don't know, for me, my sketchbook is a lot like my journal, where I'm just in there saying some shit. Pardon my swear, like I'm in there just talking about it, telling the girls what's going on. Now look at these, the little stamen in the center of this. For some reason, this one, it's too busy. I'm not feeling it. And I couldn't tell you exactly why. That one, the one above it, does it a little bit more for me. I don't know. If you have thoughts, let me know. Hit me up in them comments. Yeah, there's so many ways of going about everything that, you got to figure out what works for you. That was a big thing that school taught me. Going to school for painting was, everyone has a different learning style, especially when it comes to art making. And I think the more you can kind of figure that out, that's just as big of a thing to learn about yourself and your style as how you work as an artist. Because there's no one way that works for everyone. This is very much like you got to figure out what works best for you. And I think the more you can do that, the happier of an artist you're going to be. And I think too, a huge thing that I learned was that like, there's, what was the term? Behind every good painter, there's hundreds of yards of bad painting, or hundreds of yards of poorly painted canvas. Something like that. And I don't know, that really made me feel better. It just kind of gave me the like permission to fail and permission to make things that weren't necessarily good straight out of the gate. Because I think that a lot of times, especially I, growing up as a young artist, felt like the first time I did something, it had to be just right. And I've learned so far that that's not true, that you can be wrong and you can just turn a page and try it again. And a huge thing that I started doing is I will start drawing something in my sketchbook, and if I don't like it, I just stop. And I just turn the page and I start drawing something new, or I will start drawing that same thing over again. But I just don't make it precious. And I think that's a really easy thing to do as art makers, is to make something precious, and, that every every time you touch pen to paper, you want it to be gold, and everyone wants that. And eventually, sometimes you get there, depending on what you do and like how hard you practice at it. I mean, I've gotten so much better as a illustrator over the last few years because I just draw all the time. I mean, it's part of my job. And so I think that has allowed me to be so much more comfortable as an artist than when I wasn't drawing all the time. But to diverge from that conversation, I'm laying down some ink wash. So this is a watered down rotering ink. I'm kind of using it almost like you would a Copic marker, where you're kind of just like, I'm just highlighting the shadows. That's not the right way to say that, because highlights and shadows are the opposite. You know what I mean. I'm basically laying down the shadows and then kind of washing it out. The technique I'm using, as far as I'm aware, it's called spit shading. It's a technique I learned when I started tattooing with Tattoo Flash. You'd have one ink or one brush that you have pigment on, and you lay that pigment down, and then the other brush is quote unquote in your mouth. And then when you're pulling it out of your mouth, you can control how wet the brush is. I used to do that. I no longer do that just because I was sick of having ink all over my teeth. But you can see I have a rag, or a little shop rag, where I'm kind of controlling the wetness of my brush. And that's how this isn't watercolor paper, as I've said before, but that's kind of how I control or pull some of those edges out that are softer. I'm using a brush that has no medium on it and just a little bit of water, and I'm kind of pulling that ink out and away. I'm also only shading the undersides of the leaves. This might be controversial to some of y'all, but I like it. It kind of feels stylized. I think as far as like black and gray is concerned, I kind of enjoy it. I think if I were to put a green down over it, one side would have that shading and one side would have no shading. And I think that would it would almost work how you'd work like oil paint glazes. Again, you'll have to autofocus. I mean, you'll have to forgive my autofocus. She's out of hand. It's not quite as bad as earlier, but I'm gonna try to remedy that in future videos. But if anyone has hot tips and tricks on any watercoloring, drawing blossoms, drawing leaves and blossoms, using synthetic brushes, synthetic ink brushes, drop me a comment, let me know. Or if you have questions of what I'm using, I've listed it in some other videos. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to list it in my comments or the description. I just haven't figured out what exactly people are interested in seeing, because sometimes I just like watching people make stuff. I don't really care about what they're using, and then sometimes people are curious about what people are using, so let me know. So I thought I was going to be done after I finished shading these, and then I stepped back and I was like, man, this page doesn't feel that full. So I decided to add some little filler bits in here, like falling cherry blossom types of vibes. I think I threw a couple leaves in there as well. I also, you can see in that top left corner, I threw a blossom on over top of where I'd kind of done a test swatch for the how dark the ink was, because I was like, ooh, maybe if I do this right, I'll be able to kind of hide this little blemish. This is my own personal little cover up. But I really like how this spread ended up turning out. I definitely think I could have thrown some more falling petals in there. Just like really made it feel like full of life and movement, but I got scared and I wanted things to be spaced out. So think about that when you're trying to come at me with your rude words. Just kidding. No one has said anything rude yet. Here's another good example of where I'm kind of throwing more lines on the underside of a leaf so they kind of have that in shadow feeling. And here you can kind of see how rowdy I'm throwing those lines down. Oh, don't notice those little scratchy lines I threw in there. But I'm kind of liking these jagged, I don't know, they feel full of life. They feel kind of raw, and I'm really liking how those scratchy lines work. And I think that's why I'm really liking the 0.01 micron, because they kind of, when you move it fast, it gets lighter. I don't know. It's just working. I'm enjoying it. Here's that little cover up I'm trying to throw in there. Yeah, I do have to say this is probably the first time I've used a synthetic ink brush, and I really feel like I'm getting that like good line variation, that freshness. Well, here she is. I really enjoyed making this. If you made it this far, thank you. Thanks for hanging out. Yeah, if you have any ideas, questions, anything like that, shoot it down into the comments. Otherwise, have a good one. Keep it real. Drink a nice coffee or something like that. Really treat yourself to something nice if you get an opportunity. Okay. I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.